Welcome, class, to week 5 at Fruitland Baptist Bible College, and we are in now week 5, talking about my favorite lesson of the quarter, which is pulling lost youth towards a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. So, over the last weeks, we built up to making a purpose statement, and now we're talking about reaching crowd students. And I love evangelism. I know that we're supposed to love evangelism, but I really do. It's one of my passions and one of the gifts that I have as a minister. And so today I want you to focus on some of these stats that I picked up as you think about reaching lost students with the gospel. How about this for size? Okay, 9 out of 10 people in the church. It's been documented that 9 out of 10 people in the church are not willing to share their faith. Now that's kind of discouraging, but I want you to think about on the other side though about your students and about community. Did you know that 8 out of 10 people, okay, are willing to hear the gospel if you would just share the gospel? The problem is that 9 out of 10 of us won't share it. 8 out of 10 of them want to hear about it. They're there. There are lost people everywhere, including students, and we've got to make a commitment to Christ in our ministry, to dedicate our ministry to sharing Jesus with the lost. Our scriptural basis for this week comes out of Matthew chapter 9, verses 35 through 36. And the word says that Jesus went about all the cities and the villages. And I want you to think about that. Jesus went all around, throughout all the cities, the villages, and he was teaching in the synagogues, preaching what? The gospel of the kingdom. And he was healing every kind of sickness and disease among the people. But when he saw the multitudes, listen to this, Jesus was moved with compassion for them because they were weary, they were scattered, they were like sheep having no shepherd. And then he said to his disciples, "The harvest is truly plentiful, but the laborers are few. Therefore pray the Lord of the harvest sends out laborers into his harvest." One of the great things about youth ministry is that you're going to have week on and week out opportunities to share the gospel with those who have never heard the gospel message about Jesus Christ. And so today, I want you to focus on some things that will help you and encourage you when it comes to sharing with your students. And so let's start with this. Let's start with 6 commitments that will increase the pool. All right, and that's what I want to focus on today. I've given you a handout or a note taking sheet that will give you the answers throughout. But these are the 6 things I want to focus on in our time together today. Here's the first thing I want you to get when it comes to reaching lost students. All right, an evangelistic youth ministry understands the commitment to evangelism as a process. It is a process. I've got the perfect scenario that I want to share with you all today for this class, and this is very recent. When I was start serving as student pastor at Midway, some 3 or 4 years ago, there was a student at the middle school. His name was Austin, and I would often go to the middle school, and I would go to the FCA program that they had there. And every week, the teacher of the FCA class, his name is Brian, he would say, "Peter, I want you to pray for a young man named Austin. I want you to lift up Austin. Austin doesn't know Christ. Austin doesn't have a church family. He doesn't have a very strong background in the church. Let's pray for Austin." And so I would commit to pray for Austin. And then one day I finally got to meet Austin during his middle school days, and I can remember sharing the gospel with him over lunch. I remember sharing the gospel with him at I don't know, student events where they would have ball games and activities and things. I mean, he was a friend of a lot of the students there, but I can remember him politely rejecting. And so I spent a good several years trying to talk to Austin about Jesus and not, never hearing a response. Well, Austin ended up moving to a bordering county, and while he was in that county, he found love. Okay, he got a girlfriend, and she began to share Christ with him. And of course, if his girlfriend was going to church, Austin would join her in going to church, and so she was able to bring him to church. And he heard the gospel for several years at this church as he was in this relationship. Well, here's the awesome thing about it. Austin over this past summer came to know Christ at a youth camp. And so what I saw was the big picture. I saw this process of sharing Jesus with Austin in his younger years. And then he found a relationship. Somebody invested into him and shared the gospel with him through that relationship. And it ended up, he started hearing the gospel every week at church. And then finally, at this youth camp, he had a foundational moment where he heard about Christ, he received Christ, and he ended up being baptized. And here's the sad part, and this happened just a few weeks back. Austin was in a car accident, and he ended up dying. And I can remember his girlfriend; she was just so distraught. And getting to reach out to her, I simply said, "You know what? I know that this is a very sad, sad moment, but one thing that we have to remember and rejoice in is the fact that Austin found life eternal, and when he left this world, he was with Jesus Christ." And so consider the process of evangelism complete. I need you to know that as youth leaders, that evangelistic youth ministries understand the commitment to a process. You're going to want to build relationships. You're going to want to love on students. You're going to have to understand the value in a student loving another student. And it may take a lot of time. It may take years, like in Austin's case, but it's going to take us working together and finding our place in that process. Remember what the Apostle Paul said. We're co-laborers. There was a time in his ministry where some people were wanting to follow Peter, some people were wanting to follow Jesus, some people were wanting to follow, I don't know, Barnabas. I mean, he lists all these. Apollos, I think, was the one that he mentioned. And so people were like, I'm part of their ministry or his ministry or her ministry. And Paul finally says, you know what? It's about the Lord. It's about him reaching them, and so I'm going to find my place in that process. So I want you to also keep that in mind. You find your place in the process to realize that just because somebody doesn't come to faith the first time that they're with you doesn't mean that they won't come to faith. It could just mean that that's a part of the process. Bill Fay, he wrote "Share Jesus Without Fear," that curriculum, that book, and he said that he found in his going out and sharing that it took 7 times to share the gospel with a single person, 7 times before they ever gave a response. So 7 different times you have to make an encounter with someone, telling them about Jesus before they would come. I know it's all about that one encounter, but he's just noting the process. How about this? An evangelistic youth ministry displays an evangelistic attitude. So I want to ask you, when your students come into the room, are your students excited about reaching other students for Christ? Are you excited as a youth minister, as the teacher? Are you excited about bringing students to Christ? Does the attitude of your atmosphere say that this is all about Jesus? This is all about students coming to know Jesus Christ. I mean, are you very intentional with sharing Christ with the students that come? How about this next one? Youth workers must love students. That's a big deal. Oh man, you don't want workers in your room that don't give a rip about students. I mean, you're going to want leaders in place that have a heart for students, that have a heart for evangelism, that don't mind getting a bit crazy, that don't mind minor distractions, that don't mind the noise and the hoopla that comes with trying to reach students. I mean, you're going to want workers who are in love with students. So that is a must. As you develop your team, and I know that's another quarter and another conversation, but as you develop your team, you're going to want to find workers that are in love with God and in love with students. Here's another thing. Youth workers must model evangelism. So let's just give the scenario. You have a youth leader that wants to see students come to Christ, and so he's hyping it up, and he's saying, bring them to this event. Bring them so that they may hear about Jesus. Tell your friends about Jesus through your personal life and through your teams and your schools and all that stuff. But if the youth worker himself, if you, the leader, do not model evangelism, I would say that's pretty hypocritical. All right, so it makes no sense to me at all for you to train up students how to share the gospel and encourage them to share the gospel if you're not sharing the gospel yourself. I mean, you've got to lead by example. That's why I love the model of Jesus. Jesus was the type. He didn't just tell his disciples to do something; he walked through it with them. I mean, we could go on about how Jesus modeled that through the miracles, through his teachings, But Jesus modeled service and servanthood. John 13 is a great passage. He tells them you must become a servant, and then just a few hours later, he's on the cross dying for the sins of the world, the greatest act of service ever done. So you have to learn to model evangelism. You've got to commit to evangelism. I challenge you to give lifelong examples. You need to be able to do that. You need to be able to say, this is a person that I'm trying to reach in my life. So as I'm talking to you, I'm thinking about my friend Max, who doesn't know Jesus Christ. I'm thinking about a young lady named Cadence who came to church these last few weeks, who doesn't have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. You get what I'm saying? You've got to think of folks, and you've got to know folks that you are sharing with, and say, yes, I too am modeling evangelism for my students. And here's the other thing. If you're training them to go out and share the gospel, you need to go with them. You need to set up opportunities to go with them. One of the ministries that we do here at Midway is that we have a weekly program of evangelism. We take 7-8 weeks at a time to train people up to share the gospel. And so we do have classroom time where we're practicing and where we're sharing the biblical truths on how to share Jesus and those things. But then there comes a moment where we say, all right, it's time to put this into practice, and we head out into our community to share Christ. So you've got to model evangelism. How about this? Evangelistic youth ministries challenge students to use their spiritual gifts to be evangelistic. If you've got an athlete who spends a lot of time on the field, then I'd be encouraging that athlete to share Jesus on the field. If you've got a student who spends a lot of time working and they're in retail, teach them how to have gospel conversations at their jobs. If you've got a student who is struggling at home and they've got a parent or a brother or sister who doesn't know Christ, please take a moment and encourage them to share the gospel at their homes. Use their spiritual gifts. If your student is into cooking, teach them how to cook for the glory of God. If their spiritual gift is empathy or I don't know, being able to love somebody or comfort somebody, then encourage them that if you're giving a handshake or a hug or you're with a person that needs that hope and that comfort, show them how to share the gospel in life's hardest times. Use your spiritual gifts to be evangelistic. Last thing today, 6 commitments that will increase the pool. The 6th one is this: evangelistic youth ministries challenge students with strong evangelistic themes. There's going to be a picture on this week's forum, and it's a great thing. Sean, our church, he does a ministry event called Saturday Night Live, and every month that he hosts this event, the goal is very evangelistic. I mean, the theme is evangelism. He encourages his students to bring lost friends who have never heard the gospel to our church, and they hear about Christ, and they have an opportunity to respond to Christ. And at the end of every Saturday Night Live, they have a chance to put their hand on the salvation wall. And it's a great concept. It's actually a very strong concept for his ministry, because across the back wall there's 100 plus hands that over the last 2 years have heard about Christ and have received Christ or are saying, I believe on Christ. And so when you see that picture today on your week 5 post, you'll see all of those hands, and that's a representation of people that have heard about Jesus and have responded to Jesus. It's a really evangelistic youth ministries should model strong evangelistic themes. If you want to reach crowd students and you want to reach people with the gospel on a regular basis, you're going to have to pull off events and plan events and promote events that pull students to Christ. I mean, your themes have to be evangelism. When I'm talking about your teaching needs to be centered on evangelism if you're wanting to reach crowd students. Okay. Throughout the lesson, you're going to talk about what crowd students need. During the messages that you present, I give you an outline of friendship evangelism. I give you an outline of a way to have an evangelistic program, an evangelistic event. So please make sure that you look over those, okay, this week. As we are in week 5, we are at midterm week as well. So this week you'll be taking a midterm exam. It's going to be 25 questions long. You'll have an hour to complete it. There may be an essay or two that's thrown in there. I promise you, nothing that you see on the midterm will be necessarily new material. You'll have already studied it before on previous quizzes or previous notes. Okay, make sure you study over your notes. Let's see, we're in week 5, so that means that a new project is going to be posted this week. I'll be doing that. There will be directions for your third project, and you've got some reading to do and make it last. We're going to spend some time in this book coming up this week as well. I do hope everybody's doing okay. If you have any questions, please feel free to call or to send an email. I'll be grading quite a bit of work this week too, trying to get caught up with that. But I do hope that you're enjoying the class, and I do encourage you to share the gospel with your life, share the gospel with your ministry. So have a good week. Class dismissed.